Oh, okay. I found the right button. I think we should be live. Oh, there we go. We're live. Oh, and Millicent is here. Hi, Millicent. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Techno Crime Fighters Forum, episode number 69. I'm Romola D. This is Romola D Reports, and I'm here this morning with Dr. Katherine Horton from Switzerland and Dr. Millicent Black. And I'm going to actually turn the floor over right away to Millicent because she may have something important to say to us right now before we get the show started.
Good morning. I've made my way safely to my destination in Alabama, but it got off to a kind of Harrod's start with me being threatened.
No.
I called the chief of police's office and was not able to speak with him, nor was she able to transfer me to his voicemail. So I left a message. On Sunday morning, I was coming out of my home and found a package of fireworks on the trunk of my car. And it was on the side of the driver's side. So I didn't bother it. I called the police department and the guy came. I showed it to him. He took it off of the car. And I told him that I considered it to be a threat to my life because I had received other threats and there were other tamperings to my vehicle as well as to my car computer that was making me feel unsafe. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know your life was being threatened." I said, "Well, that's the way I feel." And then I told him about what Sergeant Taylor had told me about the person that we've been discussing, possibly having the ability to turn a car over. And that also made me feel unsafe. So he took it with him and did not promise to make a report, though I asked for a report number. So I got his card and I got his badge number. I still have to go back over and check and just see if he wrote a report on it. But then my call to the chief this morning would have been like a second plea for help or a second reporting of feeling unsafe in a less than a week.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Millicent, for that report, because it appears that there are all sorts of subtle death threats being placed around you on occasion, right, that you've picked up on.
And obviously the ones that you can't see, which are inside my body where all of the assaults are taking place, and they're only showing up on radiographic reports, like my latest MRI of my spine that shows severe damage in my lower back. What we can't see happening in my reproductive area is also of concern to me, and I've got to get that checked out very soon.
Yes, and I think I should probably mention for anybody who's watching and who is perhaps new to the subject that what Dr. Millicent Black is talking about is covert non-consensual implantation. And, that kind of thing can only be connected to the military, to the intelligence, and in Millicent's case, as we have investigated and discovered, to one particular US Air Force retired veteran. Who apparently is on some kind of rock and roll vendetta that lasts 30 years because she once dated him. So
I also would like to, while Millicent is talking, for all those people who are new, I would like to share my screen and actually show Millicent's evidence. So this is my my website here, Stop 007. If you go to support our fighters here with the boxing gloves, and then down to Millicent, you can see her case, and you can also see what she's talking about. So there are interviews with her, but also down here, further down the page, you can see x-rays of all the non-consensual body implants around her knees, especially around her knees, because the perpetrator, Randall Webster, wanted to cripple her. And this diagram here is a diagram made by a professional private investigator who's specializing in measuring body implants. And these are all the chips in her body that were found. So every single one of these blue dots is used to torture her. And you can see that there are a lot of chips in the leg region, especially on the right leg here. And that is where she had to have the operation with a large part of the bone being amputated. And then also in the genital area here and here. So Millicent is being actually maliciously tortured with chips that were implanted into her. And the perpetrator is the sadistic psychopath Randall Webster. Here, he has military training. He worked for the Air Force. And, you know, he is running amok, but he's also been given an actual satellite to coordinate the torture in Columbia, Tennessee. So,
And I should remind people there is a whole article. There are 2 articles now, I think, on Millicent that everybody should read. One is the article at my website, Electronic Slavery, and the other is at Katherine's website. I think Katherine did an update, you know, with a video with Millicent recently, and that has a lot of information and a lot of information about, you know, the chips. One of the things I want to mention about these chips in Millicent's body is that she has actually done scanning. She's had these chips frequency located. In other words, the FCC allocates frequencies to any kind of radio frequency emitting device. So the frequencies found to be received on her body and found to be emitting from her body have been traced via these FCC databases to military bases outside this country, to military bases inside this country, and to various other locations. This information is contained in my electronic slavery article, so I do recommend that people go and check it out.
absolutely, yeah. And just briefly, I wanted to show one last thing. So I think Millicent is busy. She has a couple of appointments, so that's why she is disappearing off the screen. But I also wanted to show on my website, the website that I've just shown, I would like to point out one particular thing that is very, very important. So again, I encourage all the victims to go and actually download the information we are uploading, because you can put it straight into your court bundle. So go to Millicent's page. If you are implanted, you can download these images and download the text and the interviews and the documents and put it into your court bundle. The one thing I want to draw your attention to is I've also uploaded the crime reports that were ignored by the police and government. So Millicent is sending, you know, crime reports and assault reports, and she's sending them almost every day, every 2 days, with an actual every time of the day. So 2:40 a.m., 5 a.m., 6:20, 3:44, 5:45, and so on. And these are the main assaults. And in between, like all victims, sometimes there's a several-hour period when no entry was done, but we are being tortured all throughout. But these are the major attacks. So you can actually see that this was emailed to Tim Potts, Chief Troy Potts, and to other people. And then also there are emails that were sent to the governor and absolutely everybody. So here's an entire list: Brian Kelsey, Bill Haslam, and so on, representatives and so on. And they are ignoring the live torture of an American, which means that these politicians need to be removed from office because they are actually actively acquiescing, if not co-conspiring, to cover up crimes against humanity. All these people you can see, and this is now written proof that they have received this, they know about Millicent's case. The fact that they do nothing means that they have to urgently be removed from office. So everybody in Tennessee who can actually get these people out of office have to act now, because unless these people are replaced, the torture and mass murder of Americans in Tennessee will not be stopped. So Chief Potts and Captain Potts have to be removed. The mere fact that they've got the same surname means that they are most likely part of a nepotist network, okay? But these politicians have to be removed. They have now been told almost every day for almost a year, right? And they have been notified earlier with bigger, you know, files, and they have done nothing. So I want you to read this. And if you're being tortured, you have an actual real life testimony in writing, in actual writing, with all the attachments that were sent to these people. And I assure you, this is like a small sample that I had time to upload, but Millicent is making crime reports like this to the police every second day and has done so for the past year. Okay,
yes,
enough evidence.
Millicent's reports are outstanding. You know, they're unbeatable, incomparable, because not merely has she done this daily journal keeping and daily notification of local authorities, so-called authorities. Sorry, I really have a dim view of police who don't take action. And FBI. She's also, let the FBI know at every step along the way. She has also written fabulous letters, and I hope at some point we can upload every single one of her letters. Millicent is an eloquent writer, a brilliant speaker. She is a trained pastor as well. So I really hope at some point that Millicent will start her own YouTube channel and start speaking, because, and start delivering soliloquies and sermons, seriously, because she has a powerful voice. I speak as a writing teacher. Her writing that I have encountered in her letters to various people, whether it's congressmen and senators or it's in relation to a court case, etc. Her writing is powerful and it really cuts to the bone. So she's done a huge amount of work to publicize these crimes against her. And, this is one of the reasons we support her so wholeheartedly. And she's very representative. We're very aware of that. What Millicent is doing, writing to senators, is what many other people who are targeted in this country are indeed doing. They're writing to senators and to congressmen. And, either not getting a response back or getting some kind of strange response that falls into a dark hole and doesn't go anywhere. But basically, I think most people have been given the understanding that Congress is not going to do anything, hasn't done anything, is simply sitting on it, simply doesn't respond adequately. I have personally spoken to staff at 2 Congresspeople's offices, that's Senator Ed Markey's office and Senator Elizabeth Warren. They listened at length, they had a little chat, they oohed and ahed and offered sympathy and encouragement, acted like they had no idea that this was going on, and that was it.
Well, Ramola, these people who are acting like they have no idea what's going on, they are lying. So what that is actual proof that they are members of a criminal network. It's very hard to get our head around the fact that most of our politicians are members of a criminal network, but they are. So one criminal network, it's an actual criminal organization with actual child rape and murder and ritual sacrifice happening at the very top. That is the Freemasons. And the fact that they are running child trafficking and, the rape of women and trafficking of women, that is sometimes carved into the architecture. They've been doing this sort of stuff centuries ago. Okay, so they are certainly doing it now with modern technology. And unfortunately, every single person who is a member of the Freemasons is a member of this criminal network, if he knows it or not. If he's very high up, he for sure knows, because you don't get beyond a certain level without actually sacrificing, as in murdering a person. So this is the sad state. And on this note,
or they're controlled, right? I mean, that's what these control file situations are all about, where you have these Congress people, either they have open control files that they can be blackmailed on, or they're being controlled in other ways. And, these are, to some people, this is very esoteric conversation, the notion that mind control technology is actually avidly being used on people. But literally, brain weapons exist today, radio frequency weapons exist today. And thousands of people are coming forward to testify to the usage of these weapons on their bodies and brains. And that really, I didn't really give my little 2-minute spiel at the top of this conversation, but just as a heads up for everybody who's watching, who perhaps don't quite know what Techno Crime Fighters Forum is all about, it's about revealing the truth about surveillance state abuse in the USA, in the UK, and in Europe today. And it's about revealing the truth about the use of electromagnetic weapons and brain frequency weapons on populations today. And this is being done massively under cover of surveillance, under cover of weapons testing contracts. I mean, weapons testing in itself on one's own citizens. How could that even exist? But this is why they're keeping it under wraps and they're keeping it top secret, but they're going ahead and doing it anyway. So weapons testing contracts and neuroexperimentation and other kinds of experimentation contracts, which involve artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. Other kinds of experimentation, nanorobotics, nanotechnology experimentation, etc. Bioweapon experimentation, with the use of viruses that are being aerosoled into our skies daily. So all of this is going on. We're here to speak about it, have a public conversation about it, and that's what we're here to do. So
I think, this is exactly right. And what all this looks like, all this sort of weapons testing and human experimentation, it's actually, I personally think, much more than human experimentation. It is a genocide program, but on the ground, what it actually looks like is that Americans are being shredded, and Europeans. Their bodies
Absolutely.
are being shredded, and this includes children, women, elderly people, people with disabilities, and they are being literally physically shredded by the most sociopathic, psychopathic vermin in society. That's basically it. But I think today's show, we were talking at the beginning of the show what to talk about today, and Karen might join us later. Millicent joined us briefly in the beginning, but they both have appointments today. So today we wanted to do a news wrap up and actually tell you what has been going on just the last week or the last few weeks. And I think it's very, very important that people understand that keeping a tab on the news will become ever more important because the entire speed of events is accelerating. And these people who we are talking about who are doing this, I keep saying they are all members of a criminal organization. These crimes have been going on for absolutely decades. And these Congress people, like, for example, the Congress people you mentioned, Ramola, and the ones in Tennessee, they have been covering it up maliciously. So in other words, these politicians, for the sake of their paycheck, have been covering up the mass murder of Americans, which actually is high treason in their office.
Absolutely.
So they have a statutory duty. So if you go and talk to somebody, Ramola, and they don't do anything, you have a right to have these people removed because they are actually committing a felony, right? It is a criminal offense to cover up crimes against humanity, because what they're doing essentially is they are working with the Nazis in America. So you have to remove the Nazis and you have to remove the people working for the Nazis. So now in 2018, we are now moving towards, identifying who the members of this criminal network are and having them removed, because, all these people, Elizabeth Warren and all the other people, Bill Haslam and so on, what do they do? What do they actually do that warrants their paycheck?
Well, Katherine, what's really interesting to me and something I've been reflecting on lately is that they're all maintaining a public profile and a public facade, while in reality, not doing anything to help the people. I mean, shouldn't they be responsive to their supposed constituents? So this actually brings up the issue of US Inc. If the US is a corporation, if the United States is a corporation, and Congress are merely board members of that corporation, and the president is just the CEO, then they don't need to care, right, about the citizens who are what? Supposedly we're not shareholders. We're considered
I think
property.
you're considered property, your company property. I am company property. That's right. We are all considered company property, and therefore, just as a company can dispose of its property, buy new property, that's what they're doing with us, which is why we're being shredded. So they went, and this is very subtle. Actually, it was also announced in cartel signaling in movies, if people listen carefully. So what they did is they took the nation states, and with they, I mean the secret services, the secret societies, and the banking cartel, organized crime cartel behind this. And they took the nation states and they converted every part of a nation state into a private corporation. And the reason why they did this administrative step is because then all the mafiosis who were earning big bucks from illegal trade of drugs and people and children, that makes a lot of money. So they could buy up the government. And also banks print their own money. So the private banks, the private Federal Reserve can buy up countries if it wants to. And that's exactly what they did. So now they made private corporations, which is why the NSA is a private for-profit corporation. So is the FBI, and so is the entire US government. Okay. And then once that step is done, you can buy it up. But just like companies can be bought by foreigners, foreigners can buy up the US. And guess what? They did. And later on in the show, Ramola and I, we have some evidence for you to actually show you that there's foreign corporate branding on your supposed federal buildings, indicating that it's foreign ownership. I'm really looking forward to get to that video, actually.
That was a rather startling video to watch this morning.
Show that video because it kind of fits right now that we are talking about the FBI and Millicent contacting the FBI and them not doing anything. So let me share my screen.
Could do it right away, yeah.
So this video was sent to me by Ramola, and I just looked at it. Hang on, let me bring it up. Where is it? I was watching it. Here it is. I was watching it earlier, and this is big, people. So everybody who's watching, so Ramola has really an eye for these things. So she sent me the following video today, and this is Houston, Texas. and it's the FBI building. And this is about one person who was filming the FBI building, and then, of course, as always, was stopped by FBI agents pretending to be super important. And what they started to bully him. They wanted to have his name and so on. Now, the video is fairly long. I think it's 17 minutes. I'm not going to play the entire video, but just a couple of seconds. And this guy is standing there with his smartphone, filming the FBI building, filming what the building looks like, filming the gate. And then very quickly, these FBI agents swarm with their big pickup trucks, you know, looking like Agent Smith out of the Matrix. It's a cloudy day, and these people have sunglasses just to look more important. It's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, and then they start to bully him and say, you know, what's your name? And he said, well, I haven't committed a crime. I'm not being arrested. I don't actually have to identify myself to you, but you, being a federal agent, have to identify yourself to me. And it's very good. I encourage everybody to watch this privately after the show, or, you know, if you're watching Techno not live, pause the video now, find this video and watch it, and make up your mind first before we proceed. And tell me, what do you think about this? Because on one hand, you have the Constitution and the right of every American to stand and film and speak and do whatever the hell they want on public ground. And then you have these private corporations like the FBI who then think that they can usurp the pavement on the other side of the street opposite their building, which they actually cannot. So just watch this and then tell me if you notice something. I hope this is loud enough. So just a second, let me just put this on maximum volume. Okay, so this is what the film starts off, and everybody watch and see if you notice anything strange on the building. Is this starting? Hang on.
Something, I'm not really hearing it.
You're not hearing it, okay.
Actually, I heard a bit of static.
Okay.
Is that on the video or?
This is off the video. He's not speaking yet.
Oh, right, yeah, okay. This is a great video. I mean, hats off to this guy. I really recommend everybody watch this to the end. I'm going to put the link in chat. 1 second.
Absolutely. Put the link in, and now the first guy appears here.
Take a picture if anything goes by me.
And then, I'm not sure, you can probably not hear this on your end because I'm missing with the audio. Oh, I can hear your video though on my end.
You can hear my video? No,
yeah,
actually what you're hearing possibly is my neighbor with his weed trimmer.
Oh, okay. It sounded like a jet engine, really.
Yeah, you see what I have to live with.
Yeah, now I understand, Romola. Now we all understand. So one of the things I wanted to say, I didn't want to play the whole video. The conversation is super important between these agents. I'm just going to show you screenshots of these thugs, frankly, because look at it. It's like totally overcast. It looks like Hamburg or London. And this guy is standing there with sunglasses, and you've got this group of thugs, literally, actual thugs standing around. Where's the guy with the
Well, if you're wanted, I would like to confirm that.
I want to show you the guy with the black SUV there. Look, what the hell is this? Here's Mr. Grumpy. I think this guy is only hired because he looks like a Nazi and has a permanent frown.
And he may be indeed a Nazi. I mean, his whole demeanor, the way he stood there with that black SUV, and the fact that he stood there in that black suit, black sunglasses, never said a word. I think at one point he actually made some kind of grimace or smiled. I was very cheered to see that, because then he looked human for a few seconds. But for the most part, he just stood there in this incredibly intimidating fashion. So, you know, hats off to the guy who shot this video, because he stood his ground. He did not back off, and he kept saying, there's no reason for me to move away. I'm not doing anything. I'm not armed. and I'm merely taking pictures of a gate, you know, or a public building, and that building belongs to me because I paid for it with my taxpayer money. That's what he pretty much said, you know, and he claimed his First Amendment rights. He, you know, mentioned a few sections of code, the Texas code, I guess, and immediately the FBI guy said, well, you know, we don't answer to Texas code, we answer to the federal code.
Yeah, which was nonsense again, because under federal law he was also not, you know, entitled to do what he was doing. And it's so important for people to actually, as you have to confront these people, and we have to confront them more and more. And this video is perfect to actually show you the FBI tactics of intimidation, because it's very subtle. You know, as soon as you see these thugs, he might be a loving family dad, you know, who's just been hired because he's got a perfect grumpy face. But nevertheless, he turns up with a gun and he's massively intimidating. And look at carefully how the cars that you see in this video are black and white, the Masonic colors. So black for intimidation, and the white vans, I think, for the new UN takeover. But that aside, these black vans with blackened windows, actually in parts of Europe, it's illegal to have, hi Karen, it is illegal to have your windows blackened, because, you know, then you can't be identified inside, and so on. You know, you basically can run your own mob here and, you know, ferry them around unidentified people in cars, you know. So there are very strict rules, but nevertheless, these cars are designed to be big, intimidating, bloody gas guzzling nonsense cars. But then also look carefully how this guy tries to approach the person from behind. They are swarming. They're trying to, you know.
Katherine, perhaps show a little bit of how all of these people are surrounding him. You know, the other guy on the right-hand side where he was standing with the truck behind, the white truck behind him, I think, and he looked, well, all of them looked intimidating in various ways. But he was kind of behind a hedge or something.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry. So look at this. White, black,
won't tell me who he is.
white, black, white cars. Okay?
I haven't done anything wrong. I didn't say you did anything wrong. I said, how about who you are? What's your name? If I haven't done anything wrong, why are all these guys surrounding me with guns? Did you not see?
Oh, there's one on the right-hand side.
That guy, yeah, that's the one.
Look at this guy. And he's like reaching into the back of his belt like fucking hell. What is this? I mean, I would be scared to be shot in the head by these criminal thugs. You know?
You see, the thing is, they did surround him. They were armed, or, you know, he thought they were armed. They were surrounding him in a pretty intimidating kind of fashion. And none of them said to him, look, we're not armed. We're just interested in, you know, keeping our space free of anyone taking pictures or whatever. They could have said whatever, but they did not actually indicate to him that they did not constitute a threat.
Yeah, exactly. And then everything that these guys were doing is actually unlawful. So you've got these criminal thugs, and look at this guy. I mean, my God, do these guys just drink beer all the time? I mean, these like big heavies. And you know what? MI5 and MI6 hire these thugs because they look like thugs. And they are these kind of heavies they put around everywhere. You know, these guys were trying to intimidate me as well. And at this point, you always have to, in your mind, put up a firewall and say, who the hell is this guy? Who the hell is this guy? And never be intimidated, because these people have no right. So there's basically this guy on the right. There was little, you know, black suited little, you know, criminal thug. And then in the end, these two guys appear. And what's really funny is these two guys appear in his face. And when they run out of, oh, by the way, can you see that it says Justice Park here? The street sign says Justice Park. That's hilarious. Hey, stop Justice Park. Stop the justice. That's what I'm seeing in this image. But anyway, these two guys appear, right? This guy with sunglasses, even though it's not warranted. And then this guy, who seems to have slightly more IQ than the rest, says to the guy who's filming, now I can't do my job because you filmed me. So I will lose my job as an FBI agent. And then this guy who's filming says, well, hang on, if you're undercover and you see a guy with a camera, why the hell do you go over there and on his face, identifying yourself as an FBI agent, you bloody moron? If you're that stupid, you shouldn't be working for the FBI. But now the most important thing I wanted to show you And then the first few seconds, because the conversation is brilliant, and I actually encourage everybody to listen.
It is, especially, I mean, how did you like, that guy confronting the videographer and saying, what would you feel like if somebody came to your household and stood outside taking pictures of you? And I'm thinking, that actually happens quite a bit.
It happens to me every day, actually, and I can't stop it. And then he says, yeah, but these people don't hang around. And I'm thinking, no, they actually do. They put like weapons in front of they park in front of my house, and they put weapons there, and they shoot at me all day long, and I can bear that. So surely he can bear a smartphone,
And they follow you about everywhere. They stand in bus stops, they stand in front of the Y, and they've got their little cell phones pointing at you and taking pictures. What is that all about?
Absolutely. So now I want to prove to everybody that this is that, well, I can't prove it that this is a private corporation. I would have to go to the company logs for that. So I will leave that to the listener to look up that this is a private for-profit corporation, just like NSA. But first of all, it says Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the federal, I will put to you, is just as big as a lie as Federal Reserve. It is not federal. It's as federal as FedEx. Okay, this is a private corporation. But now let's start with the logo, because you will see happy 13 pentagrams here in the logo. Now, the first question is, well, the American flag has 50 satanic pentagrams. Why does this one only have 13 satanic pentagrams? And I'll point you to the pure coincidence that there are 13 satanic, as in mafia, bloodlines. And it just so happens that the FBI has 13 pentagrams. So I will put it to you that could it possibly be the case that the US was carved up between the 13 mafia families, and the FBI is actually policing their private ownership, their ground, and you as Americans are actually private property, like pigs, when you own pigs on a pig farm, you kind of police the pigs. So I would say the police, the FBI, is there as private thugs for private mafia families, and it's in their logo. The 13 families are in their logo. That's number one. Number two, look at the building. Do you see anything odd? It says really nice building. Yeah, do you see anything strange? Because I said to you that I think this is owned by a foreign entity. This is not American. This is not the American Bureau of Investigation. It is the FedEx Bureau of Investigation. And I tell you that here in the building, you can see the corporate logo of the owners. And it's right here on the left. It is the
and it leaps out at you immediately. I mean, isn't that very interesting, the way that building, that facade has been constructed?
Absolutely. And they highlight this. They highlight, and this is exactly the Swiss cross. And more than that, here you have the Swiss cross 4 times. It's actually a hashtag. So I think this is hashtag feckless jerks. That's what I see when I see that building. But yeah, so this is the corporate logo. And then last time, if I may, I think it's, FBI.gov. If you go to contact us, you will see that I'm right, because this, you can see, is a global corporation. It has branch offices worldwide. This is not federal. This is global. It's a global private corporation. And the people you see in the video are employees of a foreign-owned global corporation. They are not a police service. And this is how it can be explained that Millicent is desperately calling the FBI, and the FBI does nothing, because they're a foreign-owned private corporation that is running in the US. Look how much they want to control the US here. They're not policing. We've got evidence that they're not policing. They're controlling. And these people are running a little genocide. Okay, so this is why you have to confront them, and you have to also confront them in court, And this video actually shows you who they're owned by, and as the investigation is progressing, I promise you, the links to Switzerland will crop up over and over and over. And, if you look at maps, I probably won't be able to bring it up this quickly, but if you look at maps of the Second World War, with all the Axis powers and so on, all the countries that were in the throes of war and were being devastated are basically all across Europe. You will see, maps of Europe with the entirety of Europe up in flames, apart from one tiny little country, which is Switzerland, which was all fine. How come? that none of these, fascist dictators and Nazi dictators in Italy, Spain, and Germany, all surrounding the country, never thought, hang on, why don't we just go into Switzerland and get all the loot from the Swiss vaults? Never occurred to them. Why? It's because the entire thing was coordinated from Switzerland. That was the HQ. That's where all the loot was going. All the Nazi gold went to Switzerland because that was the HQ of the operation. Okay. And once after the Second World War, when they had all this loot, well, then they could really start buying up the US. And you can see they have. So this is so much about the FBI. I pass the microphone back now because people are sick of listening.
Well, actually, before you do that, I just wanted to point out that the FBI appears to have a very solid presence in Europe, right?
Oh, yeah.
All across Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So here you can see their points of interest, you know, and they have it, down in Australia.
They're down in Burma, Thailand, Indonesia, etc. They're sparsely in Africa and South America, but spread out all across Europe, right? And also in Australia, right? And in New Zealand.
So they are present in all the capitals. And then the question is, if the FBI is a federal law enforcement agency, as in domestic intelligence, domestic policing, what the hell are they doing in Berlin or Bern or Moscow? Wouldn't that be a foreign intelligence services job? And the point is that foreign and domestic intelligence has merged, okay, a long time ago. For example, this is why the NSA does domestic spying. It's no big fat surprise.
The CIA, right? The CIA does domestic spying, and the NSA too. And I understand from, and Karen can probably comment on this, the NSA is supposed to be foreign intelligence.
I think it even says, didn't it say it in their statutes that it was meant to be, foreign? I mean, Bill Binney talks about it quite a lot, that if they wanted to spy on foreigners, they should be tapping the undersea cables, but they're not. They're tapping the domestic phone calls.
Right, and they're not supposed to at all. That is not in their charter. Their charter is foreigners on foreign soil, period.
Exactly. And you know what? What now turns out is that their charter, these are statutes of a private corporation. That's what it is. It's not even any enforceable legal thing. It's a private corporation, And I think at that point, when people wake up to this and they realize, hang on, a private corporation, foreign-owned private corporation is now running, spying in the US. What you have on your soil is actually traitors, all right? Traitors and criminals, foreign-owned criminals. These are foreign-run spies. So
this might explain why they don't care about running Americans' lives into the ground, The podcast I did with Gerald this week, by the way, that I'm yet to post, is titled Endless and Criminal FBI Retaliation. And it's horrific because when Gerald calls me up and he tells me what's going on a daily basis and how this has been going on for 30 years, this is a man who's been driven into penury, into poverty, somebody who was forced to live in his car, be homeless, live on the streets. Why? Because he stood up and acted like a person of conscience and integrity when he worked inside the FBI, and spoke out against the wrongful attack on some person. Right? And after that, they hounded him out of the FBI. They demanded that he resign. And after he resigned, they started to hound him and engage in massive COINTELPRO of exactly the same kind that, many people are reporting today. But it seems to me from my speaking with whistleblowers, particularly whistleblowers are being targeted extremely, and I think Karen can attest to that as well. She's been targeted extremely. Gerald will be targeted extremely. Barbara Hartwell targeted extremely. What is that? What on earth is that? Why should we accept it? Why should we sit back and say, oh, it's COINTELPRO? No, I don't think so. You can call it whatever, but you've got to say, no, this is BS. We do not need the FBI doing this to anybody.
No, that's not part of the law. That's not part of the judicial system. And I pointed out to somebody, I said, look at Reality Winner. She supposedly was caught giving information out that she shouldn't have given out. She's been arrested and she's being tried and she'll be, put in prison or whatever for, X number of years. And I was, and I'm hounded for life for telling the truth and doing the right thing. How does that work in a proper society? And mine is, as far as they're concerned, mine is a death sentence, just like so many other people. So I'm not, saying woe is me, but I'm basically pointing out the irony that if you actually break the law, then you have protection. You're given due process. If you don't actually break the law, then anything goes. That's insane.
Yes.
Sorry, Ramola. And the other thing I want to point out is that what this program is, it is actually a form of public execution. It is very public what's being done to us, and the goal is our death. So this is a public execution. So single-handedly, the FBI, the NSA, and CIA, and here MI5, MI6, and all the European intel, including Swiss NDB, have reintroduced through the back door the public execution of innocent people.
And not only that, they've they've literally reintroduced communism in our communities by corralling people. It's like join everybody and stone this person to death. And the stone today is the cell phone and the RF weapon, and triangulation, so that satellites or drones can hit you, or cell towers can hit you, or whatever. They've gotten the participation of people, and this is the point I wanted to make just now when Karen was speaking, was that she's written a fabulous new flyer called Neighborhood Murderers. Right? And she's passed it around. I don't know if it's finalized yet. I look forward to placing that on my website and to printing it out and putting it on the windshields of every car in my neighborhood, because that is exactly the truth. The neighborhood has been corralled into becoming accomplices to murder, accomplices to serious crime, because what's being done to targets is that incredible death frequency weapons are being used in their bodies. On their brains. I have to sit here, as I've told many people many times, with a shield against my heart. I woke up this morning to being heart hit, and I'm hit all the time. Why? Last night I did a live stream with Dr. Eric Karlstrom. Global Gestapo episode number 2. We talked about 9/11 and its aftermath. 9/11 is an old story. We all know the horror of 9/11. We all know what's behind it, that it was a false flag operation. And Dr. Karlstrom spent quite some time talking about his own research and what he's learned and who's involved, and some of the many theories, etc. I wake up this morning, I'm blasted in the face, on the head, and in the heart. And I'm sitting here being blasted in the face. So this is the response and the reaction. And we know at this point, all of this is possibly on AI. But who programmed that AI? Who programmed that algorithm? That when people speak out about 9/11, they get blasted in the face with microwaves, pulse shots.
It was Lockheed Martin, and these military contractors. So, when we're moving to court cases to actually get these people locked up for life, the people who are in the dark are, first of all, the heads of Intel, but also the heads of other big military contractors. So Lockheed Martin for sure, because Karen, has uncovered that Lockheed Martin is running the gang stalking terror in 47 out of 50 states. Right? These people are definitely, and what we're dealing with is actually a vast criminal network, a foreign-owned criminal network that is now moving in the US, openly. And
it's just like in Nazi times. There are partnerships, these public-private partnerships that have been touted openly in the public domain in the US. Really are exactly what was rolled out in Nazi Germany, in 30s Germany, where the government made pacts with corporations. So the corporations enter the government, in other words. So when private corporations enter the government, what does that really tell you? That tells you they are not going to work in service of the people, in public service. They are going to work for private profit.
Exactly.
Right. And that's the definition of fascism right there.
Exactly. I'm so glad you pointed it out. And then the two famous companies around today that helped the Nazis and were actually instrumental in the entire thing was Ford, that provided cars to the Nazis, and the second one was IBM, that had a very form of computer with, I think, punch cards, and they were actually keeping a tab behind the entire mass murder machinery. And I personally think that the entire goal of the Nazi system was to identify all the intellectual, educated people of integrity, with or without education, but they were known in the community, and exterminate them so that what's left is absolutely, utterly uneducated criminal vermin, because they can actually, use them. If your criminal organization, you want scum, criminal scum. And I think Europe was utterly cleared, certainly in Transylvania, when the Secret Service, the Securitate, was bigged up by MI6, CIA, and German intelligence. They came in and they promoted absolute lowest of the low scum into the police, and they started terrorizing the people of integrity and intelligence. So I've seen this movie before, and it's exactly the same. One of the things I wanted to say, though, because we want now that everybody starts helping us shutting this crime down. And as Ramola said, Karen has made these excellent flyers. And I think I haven't actually had time to put up the newest one. But if you want the flyers really quickly, go here, how you can help, okay? And there's now a new link directly to the flyers where you can get here under Join Our Campaigns and Flyers. Here's a list of flyers for download. Here's Karen's DHS Terror Watch list scam, US government abuses, and Ramola's notice of crimes against humanity. And there's also a Word version of the letter so that you can adopt it for your own campaign. So please download them. Printing off, a pack of paper costs the equivalent of less than $3 over here in Europe. That's 500 pieces of paper. When you're taking your dog for a walk, why not, put these leaflets on cars or put them, into post boxes. But the entire community needs to hear about this. So please use the excellent work that Karen and Ramola have done. Download these flyers and you can just, flyer your entire neighborhood right now.
And the fact is, part of the kind of the myth that's been built up around us is that the FBI, the NSA, the DHS in the US are all engaged in surveillance in order to keep the country free and safe and secure, free from terrorists, safe from terrorism. And in actuality, what's happened is they've started to assault college professors, art teachers, registered nurses, doctors, retired neurologists. That's who they're attacking. People of integrity, spine, and conscience. And then lying to their neighbors. So in effect, revealing their criminality and their corruption. So, and one of the things I've been finding out, just talking to Gerald Sosby, Barbara Hartwell, and of course on Techno Crime and talking to Karen as well, is we are uncovering the extreme corruption of these agencies, the extreme corruption of the FBI, extreme corruption of the DHS. It can't be stated and underlined enough. I think once I figured it out, these agencies are corrupt. We need to speak out about them. It's not, this is not anti-government. This is not anti-anything. This is just revealing corruption and revealing criminality. If an agency acts corruptly against you and uses weapons against you, I think it is your duty to speak out and put that information out for the rest of the populace to hear and to be educated about.
It is. If you don't speak up, it doesn't stop. Period. And there are people, I know there are people at NSA who haven't the vaguest idea, because they were doing a legitimate job, and this criminality is hidden behind the doors of a Project X, with some innocuous name that looks just as innocuous as all the other names. But it's not. It is part and parcel being run by criminals. And of course, it's hard to get people who have been thoroughly vetted and lived honest, decent lives and couldn't have gotten into the NSA without doing that. It's hard for them to believe that there is a section where they have actually gone out and gotten people just the opposite. Like I said, years ago, a friend of mine told me that she became very upset working in HR, I forget. But anyway, she was very upset that they were sorry about that, that security,
human resources.
Right, human resources. Right, sorry about that. So human resources, she worked in human resources and told me that NSA security was telling her to send all of the applications for jobs with them to them without vetting whatsoever. They didn't care if they had criminal backgrounds or insane, basically problems with sanity. They wanted all
record. They didn't mind people with a criminal record.
No. And she was absolutely dumbfounded, and she was so upset by the resumes that she was reading and NSA security was taking, for consideration that she left HR. She couldn't stand it anymore, you know. So from my experience, yes, they were hiring criminals. You know, NSA Security became a criminal operation under Michael Hayden and Bill Black Jr. And for a reason. You know, they were the ones who oversaw 9/11.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you say that, Karen, because I was about to play actually a bit of video footage where other intelligence whistleblowers back you up 100% on this. Really 100%. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, I'm not surprised that your brain jolted at the expression human resources, because that itself is already a New World Order criminal term. It should be actually human capital. It's human capital, but it's not.
Very interesting term altogether, human resources.
Resources like mining, you know, coal is a resource, water is a resource. Humans are not a resource, you know, humans are humans. So human resources, when they introduced this term, already showed the psychopathy of the leadership, you know. But I'm very intrigued because what they have done, the program of actively hiring criminals is exactly what they did in Romania. So it was we used to say that in Romania during communist times, there was no crime on the streets. That's actually true. As a little toddler, it was perfectly safe for me to just wander around town. And that's because all the criminals, any criminal that could have possibly been found in our area, was already in the employ of the police, and they were safely confined in the police station. Actually, one way to get the criminals to stay in the police station is to hire them, you know, and that's what they did. You know, but woe be unto you if these people ever came after you, because they were psychopaths. They were actually criminals. And one thing I wanted to say, actually very briefly, just briefly, because I wanted to show something that backs up Karen and her saying that Michael Hayden is a traitor. Before I do, I wanted to share briefly that on the show, I'm pretty sure it was our success, guys. I'm pretty sure we can claim credit for this on the show. Because what happened, you remember the fentanyl story with the flyers? I wanted to slip it in because we're talking about flyers. And now is the public report about the lab testing on those very flyers. And here it is. This is on local.nixle.com. And this is the alert number 6654640. Okay. And this is from the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and it says lab testing reveals no signs of fentanyl on flyers. That was left on the Sheriff's Office employee. So read this report, and basically it says, nope, there was absolutely none to be found, no fentanyl. This entire stuff is utter nonsense. Okay. And I'm pretty sure that when we confronted them head on, and there was absolutely like a no holds barred assault on them, they suddenly backtracked and they're like, okay, there was no fentanyl on it after all. So it's perfectly fine to flyer people. There's no danger from flyers. You can put flyers everywhere. There never was any fentanyl. Just as we said, it was bull crap. Okay, so don't be nervous. Just put your flyers everywhere. And should anybody have a problem, you know, please print off this website and have it on you to show that there never ever was a problem from flyering, you know. So
no, and there were medical people who came out and said this is highly unlikely because you can't get fentanyl through your skin unless you really highly work with it to put it on patches. I mean, they have it on patches, but they really had to scramble in order to figure a way to make it absorbable through the skin when it wasn't. So, you know, don't put flyers on your skin if they're in the form of a patch. You know. So no, I mean, the illogic of saying don't touch a flyer because it could have, you know, this on it it was just bogus. It no more had fentanyl than it had elephants, you know, so that just was pathetic. It really was. But I have to say that the targeted justice people appreciate everybody's help, you know, who shed light on this. And also everybody at Targeted Justice scrambled to get the truth out because they had not the vaguest idea where this came from, and pursued it. And some of the media retracted, which was good. But also I got a message from a person in Texas who was a targeted individual. And she said, you know, I never knew about Targeted Justice until this story about fentanyl came out. And now I know, and now I'm joining. And she said, you know, basically, hallelujah, because now a lot of targeted individuals know about targeted justice. And so they're joining in droves. So, they did us a favor in one way. So
They
that's
did. Wonderful. The first thing that crossed my mind, well, I wrote it down immediately in a comment under that news article. I think it was from one of those TV news stations. I
yes,
just said,
appreciate
wow,
it.
this is an opportunity for people to, print out thousands of these flyers and spread them around in your neighborhood. Because, stand up to what targeted justice is doing. They're standing up and speaking out. And, everybody needs to join them.
Right. And as much as we can help each other. And I love the fact there are several different organizations moving forward, because then you can't sabotage all of them by doing one, and you give that one organization time to slap these little whack-a-moles back in their place and move on too. And then they haven't interrupted anybody else. But I do thank the people who stood up for targeted justice. That was fantastic.
And I encourage everybody to download the flyers from Targeted Justice and spread it around your neighborhood as the famous flyers which did not have fentanyl on them, So this is brilliant. So I and that's another thing about system judo, is that when the other side moves, they are such idiots. You can use their move as a counter move and have even more success by piggybacking on their publicity that they're created.
Yes, and it seems to me, Katherine, part of what's going on also is they make these kind of bizarre moves, So this was a flyer on a windshield, police officers jumping up and down and saying, fentanyl, we're dying, we're unconscious, and targeted justice all over the place. That's one thing that they've done. Another thing that they do frequently is they put out articles. I think Wired with Laura Yan's article on the Unity and Hope Conference was one. The Mike McVeigh infamous famous article from the New York Times was another. Every now and then they are putting out these ghastly articles with big fat lies in them, and attempts to dismiss and discredit the real people who are doing hard work and speaking out. So there was also an article in the Daily Beast that totally excoriated Dr. John Hall and Cheryl Welsh, and extremely evil kind of portrayal of them. And both of them, as we know, are outstanding writers and researchers who've done a great deal to bring these issues to the fore of the public mind. So I think that we should not just sit back and wait for these stupid articles to be rolled out and these stupid flyer incidents to be rolled out on us. We take action. We don't exist in a state of reaction. We take action as we see fit. Then the flyering is a good source of action. So we create the flyers, we send the information out. We walk into schools and we tell principals what's going on school grounds. We put the information out there because we need to. And I think at this point in time, we have immense amount of support from intelligence agency whistleblowers who are speaking out on our behalf, right? Scientists who've spoken out, etc. And so much military documentation that's actually attesting to it. And we also have people like, Dr. James Giordano, that neuroscientist who's worked for the military, coming right out and saying, yes, we're looking into people's brains, especially a few targeted individuals' brains. We're examining what makes them work. We're trying to find out what makes leaders' minds work in order to, crush them? I don't think he completed that sentence, but that appears to be the intention over here, right, as we've been finding out. So we have all of this information. This information needs to be put out there. Mainstream media has failed us utterly, is simply publishing propaganda and lies. So those who are targeted, extrajudicially by the criminals in this surveillance state can take courage from the amount of information that's out there and the amount of whistleblowing that's out there, and arm ourselves with that information and that whistleblowing and start informing our neighbors and our communities as to the truth and the reality of what's going on.
And I would like to say, when these people study brains and study the brains of leaders, they have no right. Because what they're doing by studying, they want to study highly gifted children and geniuses and world leaders and so on. What they're doing with all the microwaving is that they're shredding the brains of these people. And the brain is owned by the person. It is not owned by the government, and it is not owned by this criminal cartel. So what these criminals are doing is they are mutilating us to death so that they can figure out how to exterminate the next round of leaders. What these people want to do is identify children at birth. This is, by the way, why there are all these IQ tests in schools, because they want to know who the clever kids are to keep them under control. So as soon as your school has an IQ test, you can be sure that your children will be under observation forever after, depending on their results.
And in tandem with this are the countering violent extremism moves that they are running now all over the country, all over the world. I was noticing there's been a recent UN conference at the end of May or June on this. And, you know, the information is all online. You can check it out for yourselves. Why is violent extremism being made a big deal of in our urban communities? You know, so this is being called urban CVE programs. The FBI, for a while, has been running these kinds of programs. And indeed, they're targeting children. They're targeting teenagers in particular. They're isolating teenagers. And I should remind everybody, we are living in the age of brain frequency weapons. A weapon can be pointed at your child's head in order to induce a sudden fit of anger. So that child suddenly starts acting out. And then she's marked. Do you know that that school teachers are being given instructions to mark who is acting out, who is showing excessive oomph and speaking out, who is, you know, just standing out? So in other words, children who might have natural leadership traits, might have high communication traits and abilities, are being singled out as violent extremists.
Yeah,
the
point I think behind that is that these teachers, and by the way, these programs are sometimes hidden under profiling of the gifted and so on, and profiling of leadership, you know, qualities. And what will happen is that these children who are very outspoken, very natural, and very good at school, they come home, they go to bed at night, and at night your neighbor will be given a microwave weapon to microwave the brain of your child to turn it stupid, so that it's not a threat to the criminal cartel. And that program is already in full swing. We already have evidence of exactly that happening. So I'm not just making stuff up. This is part of the investigation. This is happening. This is exactly what's
And there are so many mothers and fathers who have spoken to me about their children being targeted in these ways. They're wonderful, exceptional children, suddenly acting out and behaving in this fashion, suddenly having fits of rage, of depression, of nervousness, of anxiety, of panic. Kids out of the blue suddenly being affected like this. Children are being hit.
exactly.
This is one more reason. This is one very, very strong reason for these weapons to be banned, for all of us to be speaking openly and demanding a ban of these radio frequency weapons that are being hidden as surveillance devices, you know, and countering violent extremism devices or whatever. There's lots of terminology. We need to put the terminology out there. You know?
I think we will publish an entire dictionary, you know, of cartel signaling and terminology and what it really means, you know, because I have a couple of things that I've just wanted to say about all the things that you ladies were saying, just as footnotes. You were saying earlier, oh yes, point number one, you were saying someone can point a phone at a child's head and the child will act out. Yes, it can be done with frequencies, but also what many, many people don't know is that I would say by now, all children, beyond the generation that was born in the 1990s, you know, certainly the ones born after, you know, 2000, an entire generation of children is already brain chipped. You don't know it, but they are. And everything I've seen measuring people totally supports that. There are microchips and nanochips and nanotechnology in the brains of children assembling itself to chips. There's cartel signaling showing images of brains with little glowing points throughout the brain. Well, those are the chips that have self-assembled. You know, so the way it works is the technology is so small, the nanotech, it passes the blood-brain barrier, goes into the brain, gets stuck in the tissue and starts assembling itself. If you don't believe me, you can always look at the book by Dr. Hildegard Stanninger called The Global Brain Chip and Mesogens, you know, a little research book that I think everybody should have. Now, the other thing you mentioned, Ramola, is the UN conference, and many people are still confused about what the hell the UN is. Now, if you don't know what the UN really is, you can always look at their cartel signaling. Look at the flag of the United Nations, and I just make a very simple point. What you see here is actually, can I make this bigger? No, I can't make it bigger. Anyway, what you see here is, first of all, the world, but you also see a sniper's crosshair. Do you see that? These are not the geodesics. This is a crosshair. Look, a plus here, a plus there, exactly as you would have it in a sniper rifle. So what this is global targeting. Okay, that's what the cartel signaling says. The UN's logo is global military targeting. And if that's not enough, I tweeted, just the other day that this is a wreath. That was a mistake because I was analyzing other cartel signaling. This is not a wreath. You know what this is? Look exactly at the pattern. I'll show you what this is. This is wheat. Okay, here, wheat. If you look at the image for wheat, you will see exactly this sort of pattern. Can you see that? This is wheat, and this is the stuff on the UN logo. Why wheat? Well, because wheat is being harvested, all right? It is global harvesting. So the UN, as it tells us in the logo, is a global military targeting and harvesting operation. It says it right there. And then
well, they're certainly acting like it right now, rolling out Agenda 21, 2030 and, all of that, global governance, etc. And the fact that they're in our cities with the smart cities, resilient cities initiatives and global policing, etc.
Exactly. And if you didn't know anything about the way the cartel works, you would say, okay, but that's just an image. But these images have been carefully prepared. They knew that it's going to be plastered everywhere, and they like to be in your face. And I didn't see this before I studied cartel signaling for decades. This is how well it's hidden when it's in your face, because normal people cannot understand how audacious psychopaths can be, So this is that much about the UN. But then I had one more footnote, because I was saying how I wanted to back up what Karen was saying about the treason, the high treason. The high treason of Michael Hayden. And I would like to share my screen and point people to a very, very important video by other two very high profile intelligence whistleblowers. I think everybody, absolutely everybody in the world should watch this interview of William Binney. The interview was conducted by Robert David Steele, and this is done for the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, okay? So Bill Binney was invited. He's one of the technical commissioners, I think, helping to actually uncover all these crimes and present them to the tribunal. But now in the interview, which is half an hour long, there are some passages that I really would like to highlight and I would like to comment. And the first one is this, and I hope people can hear this. This is what Robert David Steele has got to say about Michael Hayden.
Surprised you didn't mention the constitutional provision to the right against unreasonable search and seizure, which NSA is certainly violating. Mike Hayden has committed treason twice now, once at NSA with warrantless wiretapping and the second time at CIA with torture rendition.
There we go. And Bill Binney agrees. So here we have two very high profile whistleblowers, one from the NSA on the right, William Binney, one from the CIA, Robert David Steele, and they clearly say Michael Hayden has committed treason twice, right? Once for NSA with wireless, warrantless wiretapping, high treason against the American people because NSA is not a domestic spying organization, and high treason second time for CIA with torture of rendition. That's it. Now here you have on this show, okay, you heard the testimony of two whistleblowers and the third one agreeing. Now this is enough to have Michael Hayden finally at last dragged into court and charged with high treason, the maximum penalty for which is death, right? Death under federal law, So now we need to move to get Michael Hayden into court and give him the death penalty, right? Because only if these people are removed can the US recover. But that is already enough evidence. And you can, all of you who are running court cases are preparing to, you can download these videos, you can put them in a CD into your court bundle, and you can quote these people word by word and say, here is evidence, expert testimony from these NSA and CIA whistleblowers saying that Michael Hayden has committed high treason twice, right? You can put him on death row twice over, and you should. And then, of course, there's Bill Black Jr., who is also involved in the torture and mutilation of Karen, right? And he also
Absolutely.
the death penalty. right? Because that also is high treason. An American cannot run public execution death squads against other Americans. I mean, he can't run it anyway, but he most certainly can't run it against other Americans on American soil. And if he's subverting a domestic intelligence or foreign domestic intelligence agency to do stuff like that, that is high treason, you know.
It is. It absolutely is. And the attacks on me were to punish me for talking about 9/11, you know, in regard to the directed energy weapons. I mean, I'd already been stalked and harassed because I wouldn't drop my lawsuit against NSA, but talking about 9/11 added the dues to it. So obviously he's very desperate to cover up his role in 9/11.
Absolutely. And that is also, you know, something to behold in itself, because you know, how dare this guy, how dare these people do that? That's what I want to say. Also, you know, Gina Haspel, I encourage everybody to watch the her speech or her interview or whatever at the Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, because you can see this woman get impatient with the congressman and frowning when she's being asked tough questions. I have to show this footage, but you as an American, and actually everybody in the world, should the first question that should pop into your mind is, how dare she? How dare this psychopathic, scummish criminal frown at your elected congressman? You know, how dare she? She also needs to get on death row for what she's done, because she was also involved in torture, you know, and torture rendition. You know, so she goes right there with Michael Hayden and Bill Black Jr. And these people, I think they should be put to death just the same design. The Chinese people have done it. They have put their head of Intel on death row and executed him. And that was a good step, you know, because these psychopaths only respond to that. And I also think that if it says in the law that this is the law, it should be the law. You know, how many more Americans need to be murdered? But anyway, sorry, I'm sorry for everybody who has an issue with death penalties that I'm talking about this. I also would like to say that the death penalty in court is a negotiation position. And if you don't start with the max, these people will negotiate you down. And in the end, they will walk out of court with, you know, I don't know what, complimentary chocolate, you know.
Can I just make one comment? I think, you know, a lot of these people, these criminals in these intelligence agencies, are actually perfectly aware of the law. The law does call for the death penalty, right? In cases of extreme treason, etc., perfidy, sabotage, sedition, betrayal, etc. So I think these people are indeed aware, and that is part of the reason why they continue to target and assault people whom they're already targeting and assaulting extremely. You know, because right now I think so many have reported extreme targeting abuse, extreme assault with microwave weapons, extreme assault with neuroweaponry, with neurotech, extreme abuse. And the reason is the people who are targets, who are obviously testifying victims to this ongoing, you know, smorgasbord of intelligence agency crime, these people are very important. We are very important voices because we are standing witness to ongoing crimes against humanity being conducted by these criminals inside these agencies. And they're trying further and further means to finish us off because they imagine it's a means of erasing the evidence.
I think so.
Which is why these video conversations are super important, right?
Right. Yeah, I think maybe they're hurrying to get rid of as many witnesses as possible. You know, half of them believe that they're going to get away with it and they just have to do away with Trump. And then the other half are thinking, well, if we fail, then we need to get rid of as many witnesses as possible. I think that's the danger with what's going on now behind the scenes. I mean, we basically are in a World War III, but it's a covert World War III. I've said before, some of the odd earthquakes going on around the world, I'm wondering if they're earthquakes or bombs. You know, because some of these elite have very deep underground facilities. So in order to get to them, you'd have to detonate a pretty sizable bomb that penetrates the crust of the earth. Is that a bomb or is that an earthquake? You know, so I mean, you know, the United States government, the legit one at this point, is not going to come out and say, oh, we just bombed, you know, someplace in the Rockies or Indonesia or somewhere. It's just going to be reported as an earthquake. So we don't know what all is going on. And I bet there's a lot going on.
I think you're absolutely right, Karen. In fact, Karen Hudis, the former general counsel for the World Bank, actually backs you up on that, because she made it public that the tsunami, so that, in Fukushima, that the entire Fukushima disaster was brought about by a combination of mini nukes and also underwater nukes on a tectonic fracture. So the way to do that, the way I would do that, although I'm not an expert, is you can always drill down on the bottom of the ocean floor into the ground and get close to tectonic faults, and then you put in a nuke and you let it detonate there, and that's already enough to do these sort of things. And it's not just one nuke; you can have 10, 15, and if we add up the number of nukes that are publicly known to have gone missing, everywhere around the world. In the US, there are nukes going on strange walks in the UK as well, Russia, everywhere. And people need to understand, this is why it's so important we understand that everywhere around the world, we are dealing with the same system. Because if nukes go missing in the US and nukes go missing in Russia, they go to the same place. People don't understand that if they still think that there's a divide between Russia and the US, but no, these are different Masonic branch offices of the same organized crime cartel, So if nukes go missing, that they go to the same place. And I personally am of the opinion that the UN is the public face of this extraterritorial global power, which is the organized crime cartel. It has extraterritorial areas. It owns Washington, D.C., it owns the City of London, the Vatican territory is part of it, but also all the extraterritorial territories like CERN, like the UN buildings, like the World Bank. These are all extraterritorial. They do not belong to the country that's hosting them. It's a country in itself, but it doesn't belong to the country. If you add up the chain of these extraterritorial areas, you get pretty much a little country by itself that has all these little tentacles in different countries, and it's pretty sizable when you look at it. It's the size of a big government's administration. What if it was suddenly acquiring nukes? Would it become its own global nuclear power? And I would say that's exactly what happened. The organized crime cartel became its own nuclear power. It's much more dangerous than any of the countries because its nukes are not on the books. There are no weapons inspectors going there. There are no international treaties. There are literally no international treaties to keep a control on UN nuclear arsenals. And I bet you, and I can prove it to you using cartel signaling, that there's already a UN nuclear arsenal. It's all across the films. They're talking about it. It's, if you watch the Austin Power movies, they're talking about it directly, about the UN being a nuclear power, but you just have to listen. You have to really listen to what exactly they are saying. It's all there. So now, if you're saying that there are big earthquakes being set off, yes, Fukushima was one. It most certainly wouldn't be the Japanese, screwing themselves. So the question is, who is it? Would it be in the US interest? Not really. Would it be in Russian interest? Absolutely not. Would it be in Chinese interest? Yeah, maybe, but then again, it's really stupid. So whose interest is it? It's in the interest of one global organized crime cartel that is actually benefiting from the friction between people who are still living under the illusion of nation states. I think that's the best way I can put it. Who is making the most money? Well, lots of money is being made by, say the Japanese hiring companies to tidy up the nuclear contamination. They build new buildings that were destroyed. Money is exchanging hands, and pretty sizable money at that. If you can steal nukes for free and you get big money from building contracts, it's a business plan. It's as good a business plan as any other.
This is what Naomi Klein wrote about, right? Disaster capitalism.
Exactly.
Connected also to weather warfare, weather mortification warfare.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now one thing I wanted to say to Karen, I've got in this interview with Bill and Robert Steele, I've got 2 more points I would like to raise. And this is, they are very, very important points. And I would like to play 2 10-second clips each to start off a public debate. People always say, oh, there should be a public debate about this or that. In the olden days, public debates used to be fought in newspapers. Forget about it now, because the newspapers are all owned by the crime cartel. But now the public debate, I think, should be on forums, on Twitter, on YouTube comment boards, and so on. And most importantly, should be in your own families and your own head, you know, for all of us, those people who are watching, you know, think about, what do you think about these things? Who is right? Who is wrong? Where do you lie? And so on. So 2 points for public discussion. Number one is in this video that I showed you, the discussion between Robert David Steele and William Binney. The first bit that I played was at minute mark 23. At minute mark 25, I would like you to listen carefully to what these guys have to say.
Napolitano, a constitutional lawyer, will pick up on this and write a seminal article. I think, as you do, the world of Judge Napolitano. Let's end on a positive note. Because
sorry, this bit about Judge Napolitano was not meant to be part. I think you know, that is also very important. It's talking about judges, but the important bit is here now at the following sentence.
You and I are both patriots, and we are both intelligence professionals. We have talked at lunch about the need to eliminate 70% of the secret intelligence community in the United States, but reconstitute the 30% from each agency that is left. Could you just end for a few minutes on your vision for the future of the U.S. intelligence community, if and when it can work under the rule of law in consonance with the U.S. Constitution?
Well, first of all, I would do the focused, disciplined, professional job that we've been advocating all along, which is to do that focus on things where you can demonstrate some human behavior that constitutes probable cause of doing bad criminal activities or other kinds of threatening activities. Either, and this is true in the military sense as well as the civilian sense, and what the civilian criminal gangs are doing or what militaries are doing. You can do the same approach to both. And it's like the old time religion of how to figure out intelligence that's not changed over the decades. It's really still the same. But what's happened is our agencies have lost it, and because they've lost it, they don't know what to do. And so they try to do all kinds of things that are totally irrelevant, building big empires and big agencies and big processes worldwide that are quite unnecessary.
Okay, I want to stop here, right? So far, so good, right? So it's good to know that these guys talk over lunch about how to eliminate 70% of the intelligence community. Way! I totally like that, you know? So that's what they said. So they were talking at lunch about eliminating this. Okay, and so far, so good. Now, the question, and then also Bill Binney explained, so what he was doing, he's talking about his analysis approach, which is thin thread. It's actually very, it's almost identical to, not quite, because he does it so much more sophisticated than what we were doing at CERN. But I was doing low statistics analysis and particle physics, which means that you have quadrillions of events and you have to pick up, you know, maybe like 50 or 100 at most out of quadrillions, and then really analyze it and prove a physical process just on those few. So this needle in the haystack sort of problem I'm very familiar with. So I pretty much very well understand what he's talking about and what you can do with these analyses. So he was saying, number one, you do not do the mass data collection because people would be swamped, okay? Absolutely. You do the focused thing, and then you pick out the needle in the haystack, and then you focus on that. And most importantly, and I'm so grateful he said that, he said, with this analysis, you can do both. You can do it in the military realm, and you can do it in the civilian realm. So if you're trying to pick up military interactions or military, you know, shenanigans, it's exactly the same mathematics, the same software architecture to pick out criminal gangs and criminal shenanigans. You know, the maths and the computing architectures, they don't know what you program it for. Are you trying to pick out, you know, military stuff or just criminal activity in a local neighborhood? It's the same. I'm so glad he said that, because what he's saying is that all the hard work that they put into the architecture, you can run these programs and actually find the gang stalkers. You can find every last criminal. You can find human trafficking, drug dealing. You can find everything, you know. It's all there. It could be done. We could find these criminals by next week, you know. And this guy managed to just do it on a shoestring budget. So this is actually very much like what we used to do at CERN, because we were totally underfunded. We didn't even have NSA funding. So if you're a PhD student and your supervisor gives you a banana box to sit on, you're like, oh my God, he loves me, you know? So yes, I'm totally familiar with that. But the point is, this is, first of all, it saves money. And the second thing is, this is the clever way to do it. You don't need the mass data collection. You need mass data collection if you want to have mass mind control and mass synthetic dreams, you know, and mass controlling of children and mass controlling of, I don't know what, you know, people's private genitals 24/7, you know. That's when you need mass mind control.
And mass transformation of, you know, global people's minds into computers. So everybody has an avatar, everyone is stored, everyone's brain is nonstop 24/7 stored and AI'd to bits.
Exactly. You know what? And Ramola, what you bring to the table is actually so much more sophisticated than any of the public discussions I have seen out there, because you're right, we all have an actual virtual avatar, a copy of ourselves, an AR version of ourselves. That's exactly right. But the one thing I wanted to say is, while everything that these two guys were saying is good, you know, I totally underline that, I have 2 points to make. Number one, okay, guys, you sat down and then over lunch, you pulled out this number of 70%. I mean, sorry, that sounds like somebody just pulled it out of their coffee mug, you know. Why 70%? Why not 80? Why not 95? And then I would like to say, how on earth are we going to put a quantitative number on this? Because, sorry, I'm a physicist, so I don't like, you know, qualitative numbers are good if you want to get the discussion started, but let's do it quantitatively, guys. Okay, that's where the, you know, where the brain power is. How do you determine what size a secret service should be? How do you determine that? Now, we all know what it shouldn't be. What it shouldn't be is what it is now, which is, I think the last estimate I saw was 250,000 people in the US have top secret clearances. 250,000, 250,000. Now,
if only that.
If only that. I mean, this is what they write in the CIA's own press. Okay, so, you know, the real number is going to be 10 times that, you know, whatever. But the point is, if you have 250,000, how many psychopaths do you have? You know, how many psychopaths do you have?
Plus, when you have 250,000 people with that type of clearance, then you don't have any secrets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
And then the other reason you don't have any secrets is you start hitting your own citizenry with your top secret weapons. That's the end of secrecy right there, you know.
Yeah, wise move.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you have 250, you know, you've got, am I screwing up the maths in my head? But I would say you've got 2,500 clinical psychopaths. Just with the official number. 2,500 people who have the psychological profile of ruthless serial killers. One of them is Gina Haspel. Now, but with 2,500, I'm not surprised that you get Gina Haspel, right? Now, if you wanted to have a secret service that, for sure, statistically speaking, you know, is very unlikely to have, or at least unlikelier to have a psychopath that will rise to the top, you have to go to below 100. Your secret service has to have, what, 50 people, you know, but then still you have a sizable probability. As soon as you've got 100 people randomly taken, there's a statistical likelihood that one of them is going to be a clinical psychopath. So only if your secret service is going to be less than 100 people do you even have a dreaming chance to say that none of them are clinical psychopaths, none of them are potential serial killers who will undermine and subvert just to reach power. So what does that show you? It shows you that it's not size what matters, because you can't get small enough to be safe. What matters is that you do not have a secret service. You do not have a secret service. It's the secrecy that's the problem. What you need to have is you need to have a public national and international intelligence agency. And the way that would look is that as soon as you have even a hint of a foreign power having some sort of nuclear program, you make it public on YouTube with all your evidence. Because what then? The foreign power can't do anything. Why do you have to have it in secret? If you really want to protect a nation, you need to tell a nation about its threats, right? And if, I'm sorry, sometimes I'm also a bit awkward and arrogant, but I want to say to these guys, you know, especially Bill Binney, who is said to be an expert in maths and an expert in systems analysis, do the systems analysis. What does it tell you? You know, it tells you that even this 30%, you know, of intelligence agencies, that's a pipe dream. Then you have only 30% of global organized crime. Oh, really? Oh, well, that's thanks. You know, I mean, I don't actually care if I'm being murdered by 100% global organized crime or just 30%, you know, global organized crime. The point is, guys, the size is totally, you know, size does matter, kind of, but what really matters is what do you do with that size? And as soon as you have more than 100 people, you lose control. And I remind everybody, the reason why you have to have systems analysis at all, as much as, sorry, I'm not shouting at you ladies, I'm shouting at these men for once. The reason why you have to have systems analysis at all is exactly the same reason why you have to have physics at all, is because sometimes our human experience limits us and we cannot assess things accurately. So you need systems analysis as soon as you're talking about systems with more than 60 people in it, because every one human being can, and this has been shown by social science, can only keep a connection with 60 people at most. So as soon as you have an organization that is more than 60 people, it transcends your human experience and your human cognitive abilities. So what you need then is maths, okay, or physics. Or, you know, the physics of systems analysis. And just as much as I don't need to be a planet to calculate how the planet moves around the sun, I don't need to own or run an organization with 300,000 people to know how that organization behaves. I can use a shortcut, which is maths and physics. Now, if you use systems analysis, I promise you, it shows you crystal clear is that as soon as you have a secret service, it doesn't matter what size, you will have a criminal service. It just follows from the maths. It follows from the structure, the pyramid organization, and it follows from the admixture of naturally occurring criminals and psychopaths you have in the system. And you can—
Well, secrecy permits abuse. I mean, you just look at it that way. You know, you close the door, you shut the windows, and you do engage in crime and let nobody else know. This is what the large portion of child abuse is all about, right? Child prostitution, child trafficking, child slavery, pedo trafficking, satanic ritual abuse, etc., etc. That's what all of that is being permitted currently by these veils of secrecy. So just on that basis alone, you know, secrecy promotes abuse and it promotes psychopathy.
Absolutely.
It supports psychopathy.
Exactly. And in systems analysis terms, secrecy and compartmentalization removes the natural healing methods of a system. You know, there's no way to recover. You know, it's like removing the safety mechanisms from an industrial machine. Of course, someone's going to lose an arm. It's only a question of time. So the safety mechanisms in a complex human system are 100% transparency. So the bigger the system, it doesn't matter how big a system is, but the bigger the system, the more transparent it has to be. So if you have a national intelligence agency, it has to be a national public intelligence agency for it to have any hope of not ending up in utter abject criminality, that it attacks its own people. So the question is not 70% or 30%. I mean, then again, these guys know who they were working with. And I presume that they already estimated that 2/3 of the people they worked with were total criminals. So what they're saying to us, you know, actually, but they're too polite to say it, is that 2/3 are total criminals and we need to throw them out.
I should also recommend that people watched Bill Binney's conversation with Elizabeth Leovos during the Unity for J vigil, because he really spelled it out then. And he used this metaphor that I particularly appreciated. He said, you know, it's like picking up a rock and you find all the thugs and slugs and worms over there, underneath over there. And that's what these guys are like. And he was talking about the criminals in these agencies.
Absolutely. And I would like to, I have to see this. I haven't actually seen that bit, but I would like to complete the metaphor with, what do you do when you find, you know, all this like creepy crawlies and you have a stone in your hand? Okay, that aside, you know. But anyway, so this is the thought, and I want people to start thinking. And actually, as soon as you do the systems analysis, you realize if you really want to have national security in a nation, your intelligence agency at the national level has to be the most transparent thing. And it makes sense, because just imagine there would be weekly YouTube videos from NSA saying, oh, look, we've now found this cyber security bug. You know, oh, look, now we have found that these people have a nuclear program. How can we do this? How can we do that better? As soon as you do that, you go through exactly the same process as modern IT companies have discovered. As instead of in the olden days, as soon as you found a bug, you got very embarrassed, you withdrew, and then you tried to get your 15 computer programmers to solve the bug, you know. But now, if you're public, you are pooling several million people, and you know, you have the world's top hackers, all of them want to shine. And before your lunch break, you have some top hackers saying, okay, here's the patch, you know, there you go. And the same thing will happen with national security, because you suddenly pool the expertise of your entire nation. And more than that, as soon as it's public, all the nations around the foreign, possibly hostile nation will think, hang on, we have got a stake in this as well. Maybe the nukes are going to hit us, not the US. So the same thing happens. The system is a fractal. So at the larger scale, the same pattern is present as on the smaller scale. So this is why, guys, your entire lunch break discussion, you know, good job I wasn't there, because I would have been a right bitch. But, you know, this entire lunch break discussion is totally beside the point. It's not 30% or 20 or 15%. It is secret or not secret. You know, I personally advocate that NSA should start having, you know, daily updates on YouTube about the biggest national and international security threats. How about that? You know, what would the world look like then? You know, and besides, had it run like that, the entire world would have known about thin thread, and we could have just, you know, steamrolled Michael Hayden then, instead of having it suddenly waking up to a global Gestapo, and our top intelligence agents didn't see it coming. And I don't blame Bill Binney. I just say to him that, man, of course you didn't see it coming, because there's like a limit in the amount of human lifetime and daytime hours, you know, you have to look at this stuff. You can't look at everything. That's why it crept up on you. But as a systems analyst, you should realize that what crept up on you was secrecy. It was not.
Yes, and you know, I have a point to make over there, actually, Katherine. You know, I don't think, well, first of all, I think it's wonderful to talk about this. It's very hard to actually imagine a state when any intelligence agency is going to be totally open, right? I mean, it's never going to happen. They're never going to be completely open. It's nice to imagine that they should be open. They should be transparent. They should get on YouTube. They should talk openly. But the reason that they won't is because there are indeed criminals in these agencies who are working for other people, who are working for these foreign corporations and working for these banks, and who are warring against humanity. Now, my question and the point that I'd like to make is, we have all these fantastic people like Bill Binney and Robert David Steele, et cetera, working in these intelligence agencies. What were they doing? Why did they not see that there was a huge war against humanity in the works and steadily unfolding for years and years and years? No doubt secrecy helped to hide it. No doubt compartmentalization helped to hide it. But what were they doing? Did they have no awareness? What was going on?
You know what, Ramola, I've got the same question. And one of the things that I want to say to them is, guys, your military and intelligence agency has basically ridden roughshod all across Eastern Europe, all across Far East Asia, all across Latin America and Africa. You know, if I started listing all the countries where the CIA was operational and caused havoc, you know, I mean, we wouldn't finish the show today. And it was only when your neighborhood was attacked that you woke up. Hello, you know, I mean, Bill Binney himself says information by itself is not intelligence. Intelligence is when you actually know how to interpret it. So did you not see Nicaragua and think, hang on, what the F's going on? You know, did you not see what? I mean, Afghanistan is recent, but there was, you know, Vietnam. Did no one ever think, hang on, we're Americans, what the F are we doing in Vietnam? You know?
And currently, did they not see that brain weapons were being developed for decades? Did they not see that these brain weapons were being used, that remote neural monitoring had already been established decades ago, that satellites were, you know, uploading these microwave pulse weapons? Did they not see that? Is this not part of SIGINT and MASINT and RINT and whatnot, you know? Did they not see that? And did they not recognize that these are horrific assaults against humanity? I'm sorry to be taking off against, you know, intelligence agents who are good people. You know, I recognize that Robert David Steele and Bill Binney are doing doing great things for humanity and for all of us. But why did they not see all of this? And why is this still being kept secret? Because that is my problem. These weapons have been developed today. They are being used today. They're being used against targets, specific targets in communities, but they're being used also across the board against everybody. And the potential for their destruction is huge, is extreme, because it's literally the end of humanity with the takeover of the human brain.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, I mean, in all of this, because Robert and Bill are very public, you know, I'm addressing them, but really, my complaint is mostly against the people who are right now in NSA and running this. This is the sort of stuff that they should be speaking about.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. The people who are currently in these agencies, you know, who are currently actually very aware of these programs at this point in time, and who are permitting the continued rollout of these programs, the continued, you know, wreaking of havoc on human populations. Those are the people mostly to blame, really, for what's going on. My question, really, my anger, my ire is pointed against people who were in the know, not people who were not in the know. I understand there was compartmentalization, but people in the know who began to see what was happening. Why did they not make the NSA take a different turn? Why did they not make the CIA take a different turn? Or the FBI or the DHS? You know, and that's my question. And that's connected to the criminality. There is 90% criminality inside these agencies, unfortunately.
And the one thing I would like to say is that, I mean, I'm sorry, this is again the arrogance of, you know, somebody who was a computer programmer at CERN. So the way I look at the CIA, it's like a bunch of thugs who like to dress up, mostly in women's clothes, I assume. But anyway, they just go undercover and then they just, you know, wage war on countries. But when I look at NSA and GCHQ in these places, I expect these people to understand maths. I expect them to understand computer programming, and I most certainly expect them to understand systems analysis as the fundamental basis of it all. And to those people, I would like to say, sit down with a bloody block of paper and think it through, run your simulations and convince yourself that deep capture is not just a surprise that just happened to happen. This is like ingrained in the structure and your entire setup. As soon as you've got a pyramid organization, you've got deep capture. As soon as you've got secrecy, you've got deep capture you can never, ever, ever recover from. This is bad. So really, you guys should be on the ball. If you want national security, you mustn't have a secret service and you mustn't have pyramid organizations. It's that simple. You know, you need to go to full bloody transparency. So anyway, that's one thing.
I love that idea, you know, and I'm personally all for it from an idealistic point of view. From a more pragmatic point of view, I always question, you know, will they ever progress to that point?
Well, we will force them, Ramola, because, I mean, isn't it ironic? I mean, you know, Karen is an NSA whistleblower, actual full-blooded American, you know, who blew the whistle, and credit to her, she is a national treasure. You know, you're a national treasure, Ramola, and so is Millicent, you know. You guys are national treasure, and I think you should be put under more protection and all the building protection, you know, for these buildings that the Masons built 200 years ago. But it's true, you know. But also, I would say, isn't it ironic that it has come to pass that, okay, with the exception of Karen, Bill, and Kirk Wiebe, you know, who have, as Americans, stood up, the people who are screaming their heads off about what's going on in America is, you know, Millicent, American, but of African-American heritage, you of Indian heritage, and me of Eastern European heritage, screaming my head off, trying to save the bloody Swiss from their stupidity. You know, isn't it ironic? But of course, it goes back to this, that it doesn't matter where your mother gave birth, okay? What really matters is your own internal integrity, you know, and what do you stand for? And you can stand for the right stuff if you were born in Africa and Far East Asia, in the Himalayas or wherever. So in the 21st century, we cannot talk about nation states and we cannot talk about national security, because it might turn out that your own country of 350 million people doesn't have enough people of integrity to speak the F up and save the country. And you might have to go to foreigners like your good self and myself, you know, and we have to do this. So, you know, I want the CIA and all these people who think they're doing amazing work in America, and that's why they join these organizations, to start thinking. Think, man, what have you done in Vietnam? Think about it. You know, how ironic. And now you need to have your ass saved by somebody from Eastern Europe and somebody from India. What a bloody embarrassment, you know? This is true. But then again, the flip side of it is I'm more than happy to save your ass. But then when this is over, I want you to finally stop talking about just America, America, and wave the fucking flags around, which you don't see have got 50 satanic pentagrams, just like the Chinese, you know. And then we stop talking about just America. We need to have firewalls. We need to have nation states, I believe, you know, to contain our local psychopaths. But we need to start collaborating internationally, and we need to respect each other. God damn it, you know. And I say it now because the US is now picking a fight with Iran. And all I have to say about Iran is that some of my best friends are Iranian, and I can tell you that they are more civilized, they are more better educated, and most certainly their children are much better behaved than anything I've seen from the US on Europe. So please treat them with respect. And by the way, they're the only country left that doesn't have a central bank. You know, and where young people, my age and younger, can have a mortgage and pay it back in 5 years, 10 years max, right? Big deal. And they've got massive flats. They live like, you know, Beverly Hills, every single one of them. Please don't invade the country and bring your shitty banking system in there as well, you know. But I've got one more thing to say, and then I'll stop having a dig at you know, Robert and Bill. But I want to say one thing that, you know, this was a technical point, but the next point really pissed me off. So I'm going to have another dig. And this is, I think, at minute mark. Hang on, let me look it up. And this is also important. 19. So it's all these odd numbers. Let me share my screen and go to minute mark 19. And then I want you to hear what Robert David Steele has got in mind. He is advocating something called the soft landing option. And I want you to hear carefully what the soft landing option is, and then look at what you think about that.
Is that doing it right will cost 1,000th of what doing it wrong will cost. Yep. I and others have conceptualized the soft landing concept, where every person who's cut from the federal government, including contractors, will get a year's salary and a year's job training and redirection. It sounds like the military-industrial complex is the major obstacle to changing how we do business. Are there any other?
Okay, are there any other blah, blah, blah? And then it goes on. Okay, what do you say about this suggestion?
Soft landings? It's very kind to the criminals and the intelligence agencies. You know, I'm sorry. Ask the people who are being assaulted with radio frequency weapons and neuro weapons for no reason whatsoever.
And what he said,
to make work.
Exactly what he said is every person who's cut from the federal budget, also contractors, will get a year's worth of salary and free retraining. A year's, I'm sorry, Robert, did I hear that right? We've got a bunch of bloody criminals, and then we've got a bunch of people so bloody hopeless they can't even do their job, because that's what we're talking about here. We've got national security, people running around with sunglasses, big bloody pimp wagons, pretending you're national security. And then we end up in a fucking Gestapo state, and we've got 250,000 of you tossers with top secret clearances. What? And then to pay for all this, we're going to give you a year's salary so that you don't cry about not having your fat paycheck that you had for the last couple of years. Have you lost your fucking mind, Robert?
I think Karen might have a much better solution, and she might be able to advise Robert a little better on that score.
What do you think?
Well, it is very interesting because, you know, I read that there were 17 different agencies with top secret clearances. And I thought, oh my gosh, the redundancy of what they're doing is one of the reasons that it is costing so much. You know, you've got people not reading, you know, the very similar reports. And so there's no coordination. I mean, they must claim there is, but there's none. You can't have 17 different agencies with top secret clearances investigating and writing reports where you don't have massive redundancy. And like I said before, if you have that many people with top secret clearances, then you don't have any secrets. You absolutely have no secrets, because, I mean, look at the number of security people that they have to reinvestigate every single one of those people. I mean, when you work for one of those agencies, they reinvestigate you on an average. It's supposed to be an average every 5 years, but when you have an overload of people, it stretches to, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, before you're polygraphed again, before your finances are looked into again. So you can actually have free reign in one of those agencies for a few years, make a lot of money on the side from the information that you're privy to, and then scoot out of the agency before they even know that you may have been selling certain information. So yeah, it's not a great system. It's not really a great system. They really do need to do a revamping of it somehow or another. But a lot of these agencies can be done away with, and certainly they need to refocus NSA overseas or just eviscerate it. I mean, the abuse is so far and so wide. I am not quite sure how to rein it in. But one of the terrible things is that
just
when
cut
you
funding,
say,
just remove the money line,
well, yes. Well, that's true, because 17 redundant agencies, I'm sorry, but you can say, look, we're going to have this agency, this agency, this agency, and the rest of you, good luck, goodbye. That would save a heck of a lot more money and give those people a chance to actually get real skills, instead of the Gestapo state. I mean, that takes very little skill. But yeah, the whole thing is out of control. And I do remember that George Bush Jr. once mentioned that he envisioned a security state with 100 million snitches.
He's got it.
He may. That's not a society. That is not a society, because anytime you install something like that, then the people make money reporting people whether they've done something or not.
And that's
certainly
what's going on.
Exactly. They're making mountains out of molehills. And like I said, it seems to me there's probably some type of reward system. Oh, report 5 people in a month and we'll give you an extra $1,000. So of course they're going to, report Mrs. McGillicuddy, the cat lady on the street, on the street corner, and they're going to report the UPS guy, and then they're going to report the corner grocer. It's a society built on lies. So they really do have to eviscerate, the intel community, because it's got, like you said, it's become a mafia. I mean, they infiltrated the security people who are supposed to be the ones that keep you on the up and up. And those are the ones who are blackmailing you and setting you up and lying about you or sending honeypots your way. It's out of control. It's rotten to the core. It's absolutely rotten to the core. And it'll take a talented surgeon to take out those pieces that might be necessary from all the rot from within, for sure.
And that really is what we're looking at. We're looking at the rise of the surveillance industry, the militarized, military industrial complex all around the world, with its, slew of wars everywhere, useless wars, and attacking countries like Iran and North Korea, etc. Putatively. I mean, it's already attacked countries like Libya and Syria, etc. And you've got Saudi Arabia attacking Yemen and the US supporting Saudi Arabia. All this ghastly stuff is going on all around the world. Wars are increasing everywhere. These corporations, these huge corporations, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, etc., they're continuing to rake in the money, the big bucks, from government in order to continue their wars. It's that continuity, right? It's that continuity of operations that they have established across the board, militarily and surveillance-wise now, because surveillance technology has become a big, big deal. And surveillance technology, as we know, is connected to this whole non-lethal weapons directorate, right? Classified non-lethal weapons technology, which is nothing but, reading people's brains, neurosurveillance, neurocrimes, neuropolicing, and assault, neurotech to assault people's brains and central nervous systems, with the microwave pulse weapons, etc. So this whole, all of this comes down to me to a war against humanity. It's the rise of the surveillance state and the military-industrial complex against humanity. Against piano playing and doing art and having a quiet drink with your friends in a cafe, and minding your own business. That's what's being warred against by these lunatics in these intelligence agencies and these military and security agencies who've let that amount of money go to their head, and they are wreaking massive power, unwarranted power on people. There is no security in such a situation. That has to be ended. It seems to me it's all about money. It seems to me that if you cut the money line, if you dry up the flow of funding, if instead of $700 billion handed out to the US military every year, you handed them out only 1 billion. What would happen? I mean, just think about that. You know, would we have better defense? Would we have better security? I think so. Would we have better lives? I definitely think so.
Absolutely.
Yes, because the military would demand that the equipment they got actually work,
Exactly.
for that money.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad you say that, ladies, because I was seeing this, and these were my thoughts exactly, that we are dealing with a huge criminal architecture, and I'm hearing Robert David Steele give them a year's worth of salary after the massive salaries that they already had.
No, please.
Like, no way. So, okay, I'm glad we cleared that up. So now I can, by the way, when I was watching this, I should also say that this is Robert David Steele. If you listen to this, he says, I and others have been advocating. He doesn't say we in the presence of Bill Binney. When I first heard this, I just stopped it and I was screaming at my laptop, screaming at Bill Binney, like, do you agree with this shit? And, he didn't reply, which I thought was extremely rude. But anyway, then I had to go back and actually look at his micro expressions to try to figure out what Bill thinks about these things. And I leave it up to the reader, but I can see his, the corner of his mouth briefly moving. And there's like a brief, like a microsecond of a frown. So I think Bill Binney also thought, oh, hang on, what did I just hear? But he was too polite to actually start screaming, which is what I did. But anyway, so, I'm glad we can answer this now. So while, Robert David Steele and his friends, from the CIA, advocating the soft landing approach, just like these guys just fall out of their federal jobs and they fall into like soft cushions, cushioned by a year's worth of salary income, So we're not advocating that, dear Robert David Steele. The ladies and I, we are advocating the sledgehammer to the testicles approach, and we'll meet in the middle. Oh dear. So yeah, this is but I think it's important that we start talking about it, because if you don't keep a watch on these intelligence agents, this is exactly what's going to happen. In their lunch break, they'll run around, they'll make up their mind, and they haven't considered all the points, So I think we should get on these lunch breaks. I don't know where these people meet from.
Nobody's inviting us to lunch, Katherine.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Why were we not invited? That's what I want to know.
I'd love to go to lunch with a few of these generals and give them a piece of my mind.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think this is why we're not invited.
Unfortunately.
We would not have peace and quiet during the lunch break. The one thing I wanted to say about this, hang on, I'm looking up Kevin Shipp, because Kevin Shipp made a very important announcement. And I think it is for these reasons you will now understand why I'm saying, yeah, here I found it. Okay. So why I'm saying that we need to keep a tab on these guys. I mean, personally, as a woman, I think men should be, they should be put under surveillance 24/7 under close supervision. Otherwise, they'll do all sorts of stuff.
Exactly.
But here,
irony profound, isn't it? A bunch of men putting women under surveillance.
Yeah, exactly. It should be the other way around, So here's Kevin Shipp, and he is announcing, we are uniting several former intelligence professionals to publicly resist the illegal activities of the shadow government / deep state. More to come. This is excellent news. That's exactly what I would like to hear, And
yes, I retweeted that. And I also, I think, responded to Kevin Shipp. I hope he got that tweet, where I just said, the prime targets of the intelligence community's illegal activities will no doubt be happy to testify.
Oh, yeah.
So please keep tabs on what we are doing.
Exactly. Grateful to you all, prime targets. Exactly. This is it. And absolutely. And the one thing I would like to have from these intelligence professionals is that they finally publicly acknowledge us victims. They publicly acknowledge our work, our suffering, and these crimes committed against us. It's now high time. We've been talking about this for over a year now.
And I notice, of course, it's only a tweet. You don't have much space in a tweet to wax eloquence. But I noticed that Kevin used the words illegal activities, right? Yeah. I mean, not anything worse than that, like criminal, corrupt, crimes against humanity activities.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these guys, they have been in the service, and it has to be said that because they were so high up, they are even more scared for our lives, because they are taken seriously. And hey, we're just a bunch of women who listen to us, But the truth is, these are criminal activities. And now after a year, yes, these are crimes against humanity. And one of these things that these senior intelligence professionals need to know is that we are running out of time. Every time they are pussyfooting, we're losing time, and we don't have time anymore. So it's time that people acknowledge that Karen Melton-Stewart is the only NSA whistleblower, who, by the way, is much bigger than Snowden, because she was talking about the directed energy weapon attack.
Yes, I would love to underline that as well for the whole world to hear. You know, there are a couple of others who've made some reference to directed energy weapons. Mark Nowitzki is one of them. But Karen Stewart, and I think Russell Tice, or Dice, what is his name? Russell
Tice.
Tice, thank you. So he's made some mention, I think, but he hasn't gone into detail. The only standing and speaking out, witnessing whistleblower we have today from the NSA, giving witness, bearing evidence, bearing witness to the existence of and the usage of directed energy weapons on the American populace and on the world populace, is Karen Melton-Stewart. Everybody should be interviewing her. Everyone should be taking her testimonial down. She is such an important voice. We are so grateful for her voice, you know, all of us.
Well, I'm certainly grateful for the venue and the support that I've gotten from the community, and especially you and Dr. Horton. I don't know where I'd be without you guys, so I do thank you.
You're very welcome, Karen. I'm telling you, all of us, I know you just said, Katherine, you know, who's listening to us? We're a bunch of women, but that's not how I think of myself. That's not how I think of you, or of Karen, or of Dr. Millicent Black, or of Melanie Richin, you know, the other member of our JIT team. I think of us as power women on the front line who have guts, spine, conscience, and integrity, and who are speaking out because it is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I did say that kind of like, you know, ironically and sarcastically.
Right. I know it.
The truth is that what's happening, it's very funny, because what's happening here is also what's happening in the family. So, you know, I come from you will be very surprised to hear that, but I come from a long line of very strong women. And, you know,
I'm sure you do. I bet we all do.
I think we all do. You know? And the thing is that, as I saw, you know, I've seen my family live through communism and the Secretariat terrorizing us and so on. And then I saw people, you know, my family flee the country and so on. So there was lots of upheaval in our lives. But one of the things I saw is that in the home, it was the women doing the thinking and doing the, you know, direction. And then the men, you know, in public, we would all be, you know, making lunch and laying the table. But actually behind closed doors, that's where all the strategic thinking was. And then eventually you talk and talk and talk and talk at the man and thinking and they're not listening. And they are listening. They're just too proud to admit it. And eventually they do something.
And I can tell you from my experience of growing up, you know, in India, patriarchal kind of system, you know, most definitely the men shout and yell because that's the only way for their voice to be heard. And the women spend a lot of time calming them down and then quieting them down and then getting their, you know, philosophy and thinking across. And of course, the women are holding everything together. The women are holding culture together. The women are holding society together. We all know this, right? In all of our different families.
I think this is why 70% or 80% of the targets are women, because the NVO, the crime cartel, has accurately identified us as the biggest threat. And the other thing is women talk. We're not into secrecy, you know. That's actually the biggest bit of advice. My grandmother, bless her, she was caring for me when my mother fled the communist system. So I was brought up by my grandparents for a year and a half. And my grandmother was, you know, of extremely high integrity. But she said to me, and I remember that distinctly, she said, listen, if you ever have a problem in life, what you do is you tell everybody about it. And you will respect everybody because you don't know who will help you. She said, you will be surprised. Help will come from the most unexpected corners. And just like
brilliant advice. Yeah, wonderful.
It is. And this is very true in targeting. You do not keep it public. You do not suffer in silence. You tell everybody in the entire world. And I have to confirm what Karen said. You know, where would I be without you ladies and without the Techno Forum? You know, and isn't it amazing that I didn't find any help in Germany, nor anywhere in Switzerland. I had to go across the pond to America and then find you ladies to actually help me, and Melanie in Belgium, you know?
Well, I think all of us, we're reaching across borders at this point in time. We're making connections across borders, across continents, etc. And, the thing that I think is so important also is not just that we speak out, but that everybody who's targeted speaks out, as you just said, Katherine. And the thing that comes to mind is the way they've stopped people from speaking out is putting the mentally ill label on people when they speak out and say, I'm being hit by weapons. I'm being multiply stalked. I'm a victim of COINTELPRO. Of course, people haven't been using the term COINTELPRO. They've been using the terms gang stalked, etc. But whatever it is, the fact is people have been harassed and persecuted. And when they reported to police stations, when they reported to doctors, when they report that they're being hit with weapons, all they've been getting is skepticism and dismissal, discrediting, and this label, mentally ill, call the psychiatrist immediately. So this is the way the so-called authorities, in other words, the 90% criminal faction in these intelligence agencies, this is the way they have been hiding these crimes against humanity. And so it becomes doubly important for people to push through that, and also for people like us, who are in a position to write and to speak out publicly about this, to make a big deal of that stupid mentally ill label, because that's what it is. It is a label meant to destroy. It's a means of establishing a medical tyranny and a medical dictatorship in this country and around the world. We've got to take it apart.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's outrageous that a policeman or a deputy would essentially say to you, I'm stupid and ignorant, therefore you must be crazy. Yeah.
And that's what they said to you, precisely. Exactly. Yes. Unbelievable. And Karen, in your case, you were actually attempting to educate these guys in the sheriff's department, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sending them all kinds of articles to say this does exist. This is what's going on. These are articles talking to you about how it has been developed over the last years, and these are the various types of weapons, and this is what they do. These are the deleterious health effects, blah, 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 blah. But I have to say that it sounds to me like what's gone on is that the deep state, through the fusion centers, they've gone to the head of any police department or sheriff's department and said, look, if you want all of these nice toys for your department, all these nice cop toys, then this is what you're going to do when these certain people tell you anything that resembles this. They're being gang stalked. They have, they feel like they're being electrocuted or electronic harassment or something like that. We're going to give you keywords. As soon as you hear them, you tell your lower echelon people to declare them crazy. And I think that people in management are being bought and paid for. And I would say that not only are they getting the little cop toys that they want and far beyond what they need, but probably they're taking remuneration themselves in some kind of form or another. They're being bribed,
Yes, Karen, I would venture to say that the reason those guys in the sheriff's department did not respond, to your sincere attempts to educate them is because most of them, perhaps not all, but I would imagine almost all, certainly knew what was going on, and in fact, a part of the perpetration operation.
Oh, I think so. I mean, at the very basic level, I'm not sure if they understood or they just were following orders, but I am absolutely positively sure by the behavior of the Leon County Sheriff's Department upper echelon that they were on the take and they knew exactly what was going on. And that's got to be the truth for the vast majority of the police departments and sheriff departments across the nation. They're being bribed.
Mm-hmm. And, that also comes back to this whole Masonic aspect, right? A large part of these departments are taken over by the Masons. Mm-hmm. So no doubt there are good police out there, but there's a whole bunch of Masonic police and they're sort of running the show. They're part of the whole cartel, right?
Right. And, it's interesting to me, the sheriff under whom I was persecuted was Sheriff Mike Wood, and he had been a drug seller when he was younger. How do you go from being a drug dealer? Yeah, isn't that interesting? How do you go from being a drug dealer to a sheriff?
Was there a moment of coming to Jesus over there in between?
No, I think there was a
somehow I doubt it.
Cartel, a moment of coming to the cartel,
Yes. So I mean that's just astonishing. You would have a a known criminal rise to the top as a sheriff. Oh.
Karen, you have to go into your affidavit, because this is worth gold, because it maps out how the entire criminal architecture works. And I'm just trying to get across that there's organized crime, and it's making more money than normal businesses because it doesn't pay tax. So eventually organized crime will get richer, will start buying up everything. They have an interest in buying up the police services, the intelligence agencies, especially if the police organizations and the intelligence agencies become private corporations. Who do you think is going to buy them? Who's going to be the main shareholders, the main stakeholders there? Organized crime, of course, because they have the biggest interest in how these organizations work. And when they've taken them over, a clear insight or a clear sign for deep capture is when they start hiring criminals. They start hiring their own. So they first put in Masons, because that's kind of like a socially respectable way of being a member of the crime cartel. But then they eventually hire criminals outright, like, Bill Black Jr. started doing, and like this police guy, One of the things I wanted to say very briefly, also part as an announcement.
Katherine, let's wrap up actually. Just be aware, because we have to wrap up soon. So.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So I will just make it very, very brief. I wanted to make just two announcements, and then I will just shut up, and that will be my wrap up. So first of all, the reason why we are in this situation is, number one, the intelligence agencies and police, but number two, because of the total corruption of the media. So I would like to point everybody to something that's called the Swiss Propaganda Research Institute, and the URL is swprs.org. And here's America and its media empire. And this is why there are no interviews with Karen on all the news channels, because here in this diagram, the entire cartel is mapped. Here are the names and every single newspaper. So here's, somewhere is so the Financial Times, the New York Times, and the CIA's Washington Post, the Daily Telegraph, and all these news agencies. What you can see in this diagram is the members of the cartel, okay? And you can see who is a member of the cartel, how these newspapers are wholesale owned by these three entities: the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg meetings, and the Trilateral Commission. These are three control arms of the organized crime cartel. And you can see that all of these people map to that. Now, when you're in the situation, how the hell do you out them? So these people did it professionally. I just wanted to say that on my website, I made a couple of new sites. I've got, first of all, a Holocaust diary, but then here, there's a new link to the new Journalists Hall of Shame. Now you get to that page, if you go to here, Blood on Their Hands, and I've revamped the site because I'm going to put up evidence against everybody. The people who slandered me, but here, journalists, police, military, intelligence agents, government officials, academics, everybody who is in on it or refused to help will go on this page. But here, under the Journalist Hall of Shame, I would like to announce that I've now made public the issues I had with Private Eye magazine. They are refusing to report. Luke Harding, who I think is an MI6 agent, the UK column, and also Sputnik News in the UK. And I have published all this stuff here. You can see my email exchanges with these people. But the one I want to point you to is at the bottom, Sputnik News, because most people don't know, I mean, no one knows apart from me, that on the 4th of January this year, so, half a year ago, I was interviewed by Sputnik News. Kit Clarenberg from Sputnik News actually interviewed me, and he said he wanted to write a print article. I said to him that I'm going to audio record the entire interview, and he agreed. He even, after the interview, he asked me for the audio recording. So he was eager to write the article, but yet when I checked, there was no article. So I emailed him in May, in June, and in July, and he refused to reply. Now, while I have my issues, I actually think the interview with Kit was great. I think he's a great guy. You never can't tell if it's a, Operation Mockingbird sort of intel agent interviewing you, but I actually really liked him and I liked the interview. I think he did great work. And in the interview, he actually spoke himself and everything he said was totally on the money. So I really liked the guy. So I have some question marks about him, which I said here, but I have got even bigger question marks about the editors and his bosses. And I rather suspect that the reason why he wasn't even, it's not really his style, I don't think, to just not reply. So I think he was whacked with a fraudulent D notice in the UK by a criminal plant in the Ministry of Defense. You know, the organized crime cartel went into the Ministry of Defense. So he's not allowed to say that he's gagged, and he's not allowed to speak to me. So what I did is, after waiting for 7 months, I have now published my interview, the live interview, the chat we had, myself. So if you click on this here, this is the Sputnik News interview, and you can hear him talk and you can hear me talk.
Good.
So this is it. And I'm going to expose every single one of these blood journalists, but also Mike McFate has got it coming, and all these other people. But on this note,
and you know, when we go toward, you know, newspapers and we look at reporters, something I'm increasingly learning is the editor, the guy who runs the newspaper, you know, whose name is at the helm, is also to blame. So Mike McFate and Dean Baquet, or Baquet, or however he pronounces his name, executive editor of the New York Times, they go hand in hand for that particular article. That is a crime against humanity, the whole publishing of that article, you know, in the New York Times, a huge newspaper with such a vast subscriber base. So that is a kind of an incredible crime against humanity, to be publishing lies like that.
Absolutely. And sorry, I've just remembered I've got 2 more super short sentences. 3. Number 1, Melanie Shaw. There was a court case on Tuesday. It was very, very shocking. It's on my website. So if you go to court cases, Melanie Shaw, you will see everything and how the UK column reported it. Very, very important. The next court hearing is on the 7th of August. I'll say more about her next time, but please bookmark the 7th of August, take a day's worth of holiday if you're in the UK, and go to Leeds Crown Court, because we will need you on the 7th of August. So you have a month to plan your 1-day holiday, do it, you know, as a public service. So that's Melanie Shaw. Then the other thing I wanted to say is, yes, this Sunday, the affidavit template is going to be released. So Sunday will be the affidavit marathon. You will not be able to fill it out on Sunday, but I will be putting out videos explaining it. The entire affidavit will be released, and the affidavit collection starts this Sunday. So take your, you know, some free time on Sunday and join. And then the last announcement, and I will shut finally up. I was working on Tuesday with Siegfried Thomas at his flat, trying to identify the neighborhood. And I've got 2 things to say about that. I will make a formal actual, you know, analysis of what has happened. But the 2 things to announce now is, number 1, I was physically assaulted. I'm not sure if you can see this, my upper arm. Hang on, let me, I'm not sure. Can you see that with the shadow? You can just about see a faint bruise here. It's much more spectacular on Tuesday. I'm not sure if people can see. You need a bit of shade to actually...
We can see it, Katherine. I can see it.
So this was not one bruise. This was actually a triangle of bruises. They were trying to machine gun an upside-down triangle into my arm as retaliation for me to work as a court expert with Siegfried Thomas, which I think is perverting the course of justice and witness intimidation. So I photographed it when it came up on Tuesday, and you can literally see a row of bruises making a little triangle. So this is one thing. But the second thing that came out, and this is super important, when you are collecting evidence, everybody around the world now, I discovered at the place where Siegfried Thomas worked is that there's cartel signaling in the people who are in on it. I discovered people who only afterwards did Siegfried Thomas tell me that they are involved. And the way to pick up these people is I discovered that, you know how you have these kind of like dingly-danglies hanging off cars, the back view mirrors in cars? Well, those are cartel signaling, okay? Some people have little crosses, some people have dice and other stuff, but whatever they have in the window, please photograph that if they are stalkers, because that might have extra evidence. That's a communication way of how our communication means for stalkers. So number 1, the stuff that's hanging in cars, all the stuff that's there permanently, also stuff that's put into the back window, you know, on the train, the back window, that can be cartel signaling. Photograph that too, please, with the number plate as well, because it can give you extra evidence, because the symbols are the same around the world. And finally, I discovered that where Siegfried Thomas lives, his neighbors hung different things on the front door. That's not that common, but it's also not that unusual. And what they were hanging off the door was also cartel signaling. And I could identify the death squad flat because it had a little wreath, an actual wreath hanging off the door, right? And then the other people who were involved, mostly foreigners, also had always the same symbol on their hanging off their door. So please photograph stuff that's hanging off perpetrators' doors, you know, front doors and gardens and whatever, and what's in their cars. That's it from me.
Karen, did you want to wrap up with whatever you needed to?
Well, I was going to say in regard to things that are going on in the intelligence agencies, not only do you have compartmentalization as a problem, but the biggest problem is that there is no one to tell. You know, who do you go to? I mean, you've got Congress that passed a couple of years ago, passed the No Fear Act, and well, more than a couple of years ago. But they were so insistent that people know that they were protected if they needed to whistleblow, that they passed this law, and they mandated that certain federal agencies teach this once a year. You had to sign off on going through a class once a year, you know, that tells you that you have every right to go to the Inspector General, you have every right to go to the EEO. And yet, you know, if you do, then you're suddenly declared to be mentally ill and thrown out. Because if you're mentally ill, you know, you can't hold a top secret clearance. So they left this back door open. And if you try to tell the correct people, first of all, with Congress, you're going to have to get permission. You'll have to go to a lawyer, get permission to tell Congress top secret information. And the Congress just basically passed a law and threw people to the wolves because there's no one real to go to. And even if you get permission, you go before them and tell what you need to tell, you don't have any protection because you could be hit with directed energy weapons or you could be murdered. So, you know, there's not a lot of leeway to being able to out this criminal activity with no one honorable to go to. So that is a very huge problem.
That is, and that's why I think Kevin Shipp making that statement, and you know, Bill Binney and various others, the JTF MAGA kind of group. I guess it's the same group that Kevin Shipp is talking about because I think he's working with Bill Binney, right? I think it's very important that this kind of group comes together.
It is.
So that's really wonderful. One really hopes that you know, some kind of change will occur over here, not just the ITNJ tribunal, which is really focused on children, I think, the abuse and trafficking of children, but over here, all of the other crimes of the intelligence agencies, the crimes of Uber surveillance abuse, the crimes of brain weapon assault, frequency weapon assault, and anti-personnel electromagnetic technologies being used against people, those crimes need to be addressed. And, you know, they need to be put an end to. And I think we all could give them a little roster of things that need to be done. And, you know, weapons that need to be banned. I'm sorry, my whole bottom line over here is these weapons need to be banned. Absolutely. Take them off the market. Brain weapons, radio frequency weapons, nervous system weapons. We do not need them. Humanity is not going to survive with these weapons over here. But you know, this is the problem. They've entrenched the system now. They've got people. They've rigged out cars, trucks, SUVs with these weapons. They've got an electronic concentration camp grid set up. They are really invested in this weapon infrastructure. So it's going to take a huge effort worldwide to bring about a change in this regard. Right. And this is why this is sort of a call to action to everybody. Everyone's got to get involved. This is the end of humanity as we know it. Once your brain can be assaulted and attacked, once your body can be assaulted and attacked remotely from a distance with spectrum and invisible weapons, that is the end of human security and human freedom. You know?
It is. I agree.
So that's what I would say. You know, everybody needs to work together toward this end. People need to wake up and recognize that mainstream media hasn't been covering this for a very good reason. They're deep in the pockets of the military-industrial intelligence complex establishment. You know, there are only people like us. We're the little outposts of truth over here in this landscape, in this rather bleak landscape at this point in time. But it promises to get a lot bleaker if people do not act, people do not wake up. So everybody does need to. Alt media totally needs to wake up. Karen's here for an interview anytime. I'm sure Catherine's here for an interview. I'd be happy to interview with anybody, so call us, please. You know, that, and on that note, we're going to have to end this show. I've been cyber hacked the entire week, and I just wanted to let people know, do watch out for my podcasts that are upcoming, which I've been unable to post them this past week because I've been computer frozen. files corrupted, files grabbed, downloads not occurring, this, that, and the other. So, podcast with Gerald Sosby, podcast with Barbara Hartwell, and podcast with Sienna Leah of Rice Multiversity. Wonderful podcast, Interview with Changemaker. All of these are pending. I do have the files. They will be posted, but it's taking me a little while, clearly, So, but it'll be out there shortly, so do look for those. So on that note, unless anyone has any last words to say. Okay, so on that note, I guess we'll have to bid everyone goodbye. Thanks so much for watching. And we'll be again next week to light another little fire under certain people's chairs. All right, see y'all. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.